Hi, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So today I'm going to take you through the setup of the basic model for the Nb4 Pro Plus and yeah, see how we go on this one. So first off, we've got us Nb4 Pro Plus. So we're going to go into the model. Now, first decision you've got to make is whether you want a classic or an enhanced receiver. The enhanced receivers are really good for setting all the different frequencies on different ports. Also, if you want to run iBus 2 or anything like that. Your classic receivers are a lot more basic. They will run the sensors, but only the iBus ones. And you've only got up to 400 Hz on these. These enhanced ones, so any of the ones with coloured bands other than red, generally an enhanced receiver, so these can go up to 1000 Hz, but you do have to match your servo with 1000 Hz. So if you're wanting to get the best out of it and the quickest connection, then you're going to want to go enhanced. So next thing we need to do is choose how many channels we've got. So bearing in mind we've got up to 18 channels on this, so we've got 12, 4, and I believe we've got some 8-channel ones kicking about somewhere. So we've got 8-channel receivers. But yeah, depending on what model you go in. So we're going to set this up as though we're going just on a normal 4-channel. So we're going to have to go in channel number definition and set it to 4. If you're racing, you might want to ditch 2 of the channels and just go for 2-channel fast, which is the fastest connection mode. But I'm just going to set this up on 4. Then you've got your radio frequency setup. So again, you can go for 1-way, 2-way. If you're going on mini Z's, you're not going to be binding to one of these. So I'm going to set it up 2-way just because we've got telemetry as well. And then, so once we've set as channel number definition and our frequency is set to 1 or 2-way, 1-way will give you slightly lower latency, but in all honesty, they're that fast I've not really noticed any difference. So we can come out, we can go to his RX menu. Then we want to choose his interface protocol. So if you're not using any iBus 2 or iBus sensors, so you just want to use the BVD cable, or you're just using normal servos, we can leave all these set to PWM. If, for example, you wanted to use a steering servo that was iBus 2, you look and your NPD, Newport D, we'd go into here and we'd change that to iBus 2. For me, I'm going to set this up as normal, so we leave it all PWM. So we go into as bind. Now we're using an enhanced receiver. You want to make sure that the start channel is on steering, which is going to make channel 1 your steering, and you're not using dual RX, so don't put a tick in there. Then all we've got to do is press and hold as bind button, power up our little receiver and press start bind.
Binding successful.
That's got us bound up. You can see signal jumps. We can go into servo frequency, and at the minute we've got them all set normal. So if your steering servo was 1000 Hz servo, you can go in here and you can set SFR or SR or digital 380 or custom 400, but on the custom one you can change it up and down to whatever you like. But as a rule, 380 Hz will work fine. If you've got really crappy servos, you may need to drop it down to analog, which is 95 Hz or even 60. So we can set each one of them individually, or we can set them all. The only time that you'd want to set one different is if you've got 1000 Hz servo, but your ESC can't run at 1000 Hz or another one can't. If all your equipment can run at 1000, you can set it to that. We're just going to use some servo set as standard today. So I'm just going to leave it all set to digital. When you're in here, you can also go in and set your name. I'm not going to do that because I reset this one all the time. So basically we've got his receiver powered up. If we just grab some servos, so I'll use these to represent throttle and a steering. So let's plug these in. So one in channel 1, one in channel 2. I'm just going to show this as a very basic setup. So you can see we've got a steering and we've got a throttle. Should you need to reverse any of them, you can pop in here, go to reverse menu. So if we turn that way, we're doing that. We can just reverse it, and then we're doing the opposite. Make sure you set these before you go in and you set in your trim or anything like that. As a rule, the first thing that I would do is set the sub trim before setting the endpoints, because then you're not going to have to go back into your endpoints. So if we want to make sure it's perfectly centered, you can trim that first. Likewise with the throttle. So if we drop down to throttle, we can trim that, make sure it's absolutely perfect. So next is your endpoint travel. So we've got 100% each way. You can just go in and you can turn these down. So we can set as endpoints, and you can do that on any other channel, also on the throttle. So just make sure you've got the one selected that you're doing. So if you make sure you've got one of them selected, it will flick automatically. But then if you go back to steering, you need to tell it you're doing your steering before it'll pick up that it's changing it. And that will give you your basic setup. You've got a readout on the screen what will show you exactly what your servo's doing. You've got the RX voltage, which if you're on a nitro like this is set up for, it would be your receiver pack voltage. If you're running on anything else, so if you're going to be running off of an ESC, the RX voltage will be your BEC voltage from your ESC. So you, as a rule, you're not going to see that fluctuate. Is a good way of seeing if your servos are overpowering your ESC's BEC, because if you look as we turn these, you'll see slight voltage drop. But if you're trying to use your steering and you're seeing a lot of voltage drop and you're running it off an ESC, it's a pretty good way of telling that your ESC's BEC can't provide enough amps for your servo. So it's useful in diagnosing weird little issues like that. Another effect to that would be that sometimes when you're steering, you'll get like brownouts on your receiver and it'll go signal lost and then come back instantly as you stop using steering. So it's a good way of diagnosing that. If you connect the BVD cable, so if we plug the BVD cable in, if you're going to measure the actual LiPo that you're running the vehicle off, so if it's a nitro and you're running it from this, you don't really need this because you're already getting RX voltage. We're going to have to use a bit of imagination here. So if that was an ESC being powered off a LiPo that's giving us the power to this, so if you wanted to read the pack voltage of this, you would only use the positive pin, tape the negative pin up, because if you accidentally plug the negative into the positive of the LiPo that's running the receiver, you're going to have problems. If, however, you're running off an external pack, you can plug them both in. So say you want to monitor an external battery that's powering lights or something like that, we can just go in and then you can go into display sensors and we can see as BVD voltage. And we can also go choose sensor and we can go in here, and if I remember where BVD is, there we go. So we can come off and we've got the BVD voltage, so we're seeing the actual voltage of this pack that you may have running lights or something else. So it's also very useful to have. If you were running it from an ESC, then you can plug this in and get your pack voltage, but you don't need the negative. So if it's the battery that's running your ESC that's then running your receiver, you can just plug in the positive and you'll get the actual battery voltage. That way you can have the battery voltage, and then the RX voltage will be the voltage that the BEC is feeding. So comes in quite handy for that. You can see what your main pack voltage is. But that's just your basic setup, how you'd configure it and how you'd choose what you'd want, and where you'd set your servo frequencies. You can actually change the RX icon as well. I've done videos on that on all the other playlists for Nb4, Nb4 Plus. But I think if we go in, is it RX setting? So you go to your RX battery, you can set your high and low point and the alarm point for this icon, and you can have it internal will be what's feeding the receiver. You can have BVD or you can have external sensors. So you can have that actually going down when your main battery goes down if you're using BVD. But I've done videos on how to configure all that and the alarms. So yeah, that's your basic setup. How you'd set up an enhanced receiver, how you'd get to the servo frequencies, how you'd set your endpoints and your sub trim. So hopefully that'll get you started with your Nb4 Pro Plus. So let's wrap this one up. So there you have it, quick setup guide for getting your RC on there and what all the basic settings do to get you up and running. And the BVD cable can come in quite handy. Also monitoring the RX voltage, give you good hints to if your servos are overpowering your BEC or the battery that you're running your nitro off, if you're seeing that voltage drop too low when you're trying to steer. So yeah, they're the basic setups. Hopefully you find that useful or entertaining, or just like listening to my incessant ramblings. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, chat to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.